for everybody who, as you said, is concerned first and foremost with defeating Trump, they are morally obligated to vote for Bernie in the primaries.
Yep.
Because he is the only one who has a significant chunk of people who will not vote for the nominee, which means you have to pick him. Because if he doesn't get the nomination, you're SOL. So if you're really concerned, as you said earlier, with electability, you have to pick Bernie.
Okay.
God bless Matty B. Stats. Matt Burdig, the ultimate response to all this shit about will you vote is no. So you have to pick Bernie.
Yeah.
If you care about electability, you have to pick Bernie because the Bernie Bros won't vote for any alternative.
Yeah. Shout out to Matty B and Carl Bayer too, who is also a pioneer of this particular line of argumentation.
And it's undefeatable. There's no response.
It's really the perfect answer because originally the way this conversation went was they were asking us as individuals who we might vote for, and Matt says, "I live in New York. What do you fucking care? What does it matter?" I think that it doesn't matter anywhere what your individual voting decision is, because that's just like, what do you fucking care? That's just saying politics just boils down to basically an individual consumer choice.
Well, what it is that they're trying, because the big problem for the centrists, I've been thinking about this, and this is what I've come up with. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong. The big issue for the centrists is that they prize their moral high ground they have vis-a-vis the Republicans. It's their entire identity. And they are, one of the reasons they hate leftists so much is because leftists take the moral high ground from them, leaving them to have to say, like, look, you might have more these ideals, but I live in the real world, you fucking little pieces of shit. And one of the few ways that they could try to regain the high ground morally is to say, well, yes, the greater danger, as we would all agree, are these horrible Republicans, which means if you won't vote for whoever our nominee is, then you're a bad person. And it's purely about psychically feeling superior. But what they don't realize is that they have opened the door, and it's like, if you care about this hard-boiled shit about just winning at all costs, then guess what? The guy with the biggest group of voters who won't show up to vote for the nominee if it's not them, I'm sorry, he is the winner of any argument about electability.
The other thing that I rolled around in my head was, again, it doesn't matter what I decide to do. I probably would, if the nominee is anyone but Bernie, I probably wouldn't make up my mind until Election Day, honestly.
Yeah.
But something that does matter is what people would collectively do if someone like Pete Buttigieg won the nomination. And something I realized was, if Pete Buttigieg were the nominee, it's not just whether or not I'd vote for him, it's whether I would do anything on his behalf. Yeah. And the answer is I would do nothing for him. You would do nothing for Pete Buttigieg.
I would not. I honestly, like, if it was, I mean, I wouldn't have to wait that long. I mean, living in New York City, I would not vote for Pete Buttigieg.
Well, it's not even vote. Again, it's, would you volunteer for him?
I would not.
Would you donate money to him? Would you defend him against the Republican attacks when they swift boat him about
I would not lift
military record?
And our show would not talk about him in any positive way.
Would you hold back from criticizing
ignore the presidential election if it was those guys?
I mean, would you even hold back from criticizing
Not
him?
in the slightest.
No, and that's honestly the sentiment. Like, whether or not they're willing to say it, that's really the sentiment from most people that I know and people that I'm familiar with who are like prominent Bernie supporters. It's like not that, all the Bernie people will get absorbed into Pete Buttigieg's general election campaign. It's that, well, all right, fuck off.
No, I mean, if Bernie does not get the nomination, then it's no longer my problem.
Absolutely.
It's yours.
It's not my race.
It's like it's your problem now. Like, good luck.
And the thing that they like to harp on, and the thing that they have used in the past, is always, well, look, we have to do the most to mitigate harm. Now that you don't have your nominee, we have to mitigate harm. But a large percentage, and I would say a significant enough to maybe even determine the outcome percentage of Bernie supporters, see this election, I know I do, as the last off-ramp to apocalypse. So I'm sorry, in the long term, there is no difference between a Biden presidency and a second Trump term. There is no difference between a Mayo Pete term and a Trump term, in that we are not bending the curve away from Armageddon enough for it to matter.
So the question isn't really, do I support, if Pete were the nominee, would I support Pete or a third party candidate? The question is more, would I even care about the electoral process at that point?
I think one thing that really gives it away is the number of people who are pre-angry at Tulsi Gabbard because they see her doing a third party run and then like being the nadir of 2020. And you could, when you see the people mad at Tulsi, like they're all heading themselves up as Putin is going to get her to be the third party, and she's going to split the debt and it's like, you know what? That might happen if you nominate a Biden or a Buttigieg. But guess what? You don't have to nominate a Biden or a Buttigieg. If Bernie's the nominee, there is basically a 0% chance that Tulsi runs some disaffected leftist third party candidacy. That's not going to happen.
So I've been rolling this around in my head, which tack makes more sense to give the threat and essentially make the argument that, okay, you have to support Bernie if you want to beat Trump, because you've said that beating Trump is your only issue. It's not the most salient issue. It's the only issue, which means by definition, you do not care about anything else. You don't care about policy differences. You don't care about like who was the better health plan or whatever, who was the better vision for the country.
Right.
You don't even care who the fucking nominee is. You just want a meat sack that will beat Trump.
Yep.
And that means you have to support Bernie.
It's true.
If we make the argument that Bernie supporters as a block, a big chunk of them, will not vote for any other nominee. And I mean, let me finish this thought. And like that can backfire, I think, and just make people more pissed off, because that's essentially asking them to call their bluff and say, okay, either you do that or you concede that you're a liar and you're actually perfectly fine with 4 years of Trump, which most of them are, because here's the thing, you could not factually make that argument. I saw a recent opinion survey that asked supporters of the top 4 candidates, okay, if your guy doesn't win, will you support, whoever the nominee is? It's something like 10-15% of Biden supporters, 10-15% of people who just supporters will not support the ticket. That percentage for Bernie supporters who will take their ball and go home, 4%, according to one survey.
Like I would say, knowing our listeners to the extent that I do, I would imagine that like a good percentage of them will vote for Elizabeth Warren, or if you live in a swing state, just hold their nose and vote for the Democrat. But I think it gets to your point, Virgil. It's really more about, will I do anything actively to help this campaign or say anything nice about it?
Will I fight for this thing?
Will I fight for it to happen? Will I be really invested in the outcome? No, not really. I mean, again, like gun to my head, would I want a Democrat or Republican to win this election? Like, I guess I'll choose the Democrat. But like, to me, that's like not really like something I emotionally feel in my core. You know what I mean? And the thing is, like, it is about calling their bluff, because they're all bluffing. They're all bluffing.
I think some voters aren't bluffing. I think a lot of voters do genuinely care about electability, and I think that's Biden's pitch. But among the pundit class who say they care about electability, I would say it's close to 100% are full of shit.
Yeah, it's a gotcha, and for the reasons that I laid out, you should never take any of that seriously. And fortunately, the vast majority of voters do not care about any of this shit.
Yeah,
I saw a post from a guy I follow who said, one of the questions I didn't expect to get while canvassing for Bernie was, who the fuck is Bernie Sanders? And that's kind of where a lot of people are, because a lot of people are
they're not paying attention.
They're not listening to skullduggery.
No.
They're not listening to the Beltway wisdom.
The vast majority of people make their decisions, as we've discussed before, 2 weeks out ahead of time.
Let's move on and